So you might have seen that the Church of Scientology was convicted of fraud in France. And the notion was that Scientology can no longer hide behind the freedom of conscience or freedom of religion protections in France. And the notion was fraud, that people were buying thousands of dollars worth of product to remove engrams from their brain, or these things that were holding them back in life, and paying a lot for this curriculum and self-help type products. And that on a fraud basis, contractual fraud basis, the Church of Scientology was convicted, and that it can't argue that it's a religion. And at first I'm thinking, hey, that's great. Church of Scientology gets convicted of fraud in France. And I'm thinking that, yeah, L. Ron Hubbard once told us that if you want to, make $1 million, that you create a religion, right? And he had a bet, the infamous bet at a bar, where he writes that on the back of a napkin, and he writes Dianetics, and the rest is history of the Church of Scientology. So that's my initial gut reaction is, yeah, it should be treated like a business. And therefore, if there's fraud occurring, they should be treated under contract principles for fraud. But then I thought about it. And when you really look at what's going on there, well, wait a minute, what's next? Who's to say that something's a religion or a belief system or a faith system versus a business product, something that's subject to advertising rules or misrepresentation type rules, in this case, fraud? If I'm promised eternal salvation based on some holy book, is that one day going to be deemed fraudulent, misrepresentation, based on whoever's in power at the time, who's ever setting the rules? So I once looked at this case as, well, it's just the Church of Scientology in France convicted of fraud for hoodwinking people. But then I looked further out and I went, wow, depending on who's in control, at any given time, I could take a religion, a belief system, and say that it's subject to fraud. It's subject to misrepresentation, false advertising principles. And whoever's in control could say at any given time that religion, you cannot protect your business under some notion of freedom of religion or freedom of association or freedom of speech or freedom of conscience. That it's going to be subject to business principles, contract principles. Really brings up the power of the First Amendment. The First Amendment in the U.S. Constitution. The First Amendment that protects our rights to freedom of expression and freedom of religion, freedom of conscience, freedom of speech, freedom of association. Something to think about when we look at these cases across the ocean, when we look at these cases that are applied to, that way of thinking, that religion, that cult or self-help movement. But don't forget, it's whoever's in power that might say at one point that that belief system is acting as fraud upon the masses.